Hi, I'm Dave, welcome to the channel and welcome to Scenery Scratch Build Part 4. Now this was originally just let's make something out of an old wooden box, and it has, like a lot of these things do, got completely out of hand. Now this is where we left it last time. There were still a lot of things to do, still no people, still no interior in here. I've done nothing inside the garages, and there's a lot of tidying up and just adding decoration to the bits I've already done. Now the first thing I'm going to do here is move that out of the way, and that. I've got this whole section here which at the moment doesn't have a wall. I mean it does, but it's just a piece of wood. It needs to look like a wall, and as I said before, with this piece being newer than this piece, I need to sort of age this down a bit more, make it a slightly darker colour than this is. So the first thing I'm going to do really is put some bricks on the wall, which I'll just print out some brick pattern and I'll put it on the wall, and I'll show you what I'm going to do there. Then I'm going to put some sort of coping stones along the top. And I need to darken this up slightly, which I'll probably just overspray a little bit with just a very light touch of black, just to dull it down a bit. And then I need to get back to what I mentioned in last time's introduction and never got round to. Health and safety bollards. I know a car hitting a bollard, bits would end up on the spectators who are going to be sitting on these little benches here. Well pointed out, Darren Peake, but this is a fantasy world and I'm going to pretend that's not going to happen. Because, okay, function is following form and not the other way around in this case. It's not usually me, but need a little bit of poetic license here. So, round to the bench, I'll take this piece round and we'll deal with the wall and the slabs round there. So here on the bench, it's time to put bricks on the brick wall. So I found a brick texture and I scaled it down so it's about the right size of brick. And these are Flemish bond because this is a solid brick wall, not a single skim with piers. So it needs to be the right bond of brickwork. And I've cut them out into these squares. Now, if I take one of these out of here, and this area is obviously, it's too tall. Obviously it's too tall, but that's okay. Because what I'm going to do is just fold that over there like that, just to see how tall it actually is. Slightly taller than that. So that will fit on there, and it can just roll over the top edge of the wall there and fit on fine. There's a reason for that. Come back to that in a minute. So I'll just cut the rest of these out and cut them to the same height as this, and then I'll be back. So here's the pieces all cut out now, all the same size. Now before we do anything else, because I've cut them out, the very ends here, I'm just going to colour up with a black marker because this is going to matter in a little bit. Doesn't need to be perfect, you just need to take some of the whiteness off the edge of that piece of paper. That's better. Now it is just a case of wallpapering this wall with these bricks. However, when they build long brick walls, they do a panel and then they put an expansion joint in it vertically, and then they do another one. And those expansion joints are generally black. So that's kind of what I'm going to do here. If I measure around here, then I know that about there-ish, this needs to be black. And I can should get a better black pen, really. But there's a nice fat mark there. And so if I use a bit of my favourite glue stick, and then if I stick this on here, this will then come up to that black line. Fold that over. Don't worry about that for a moment. And then the next one can go in just next to it. So there is just the slight hint of a black expansion joint between each of these panels. So I shall repeat that all the way along here, and then I'll be back again. Okay, here we are done. Now it may not look like much, but those little expansion lines in there, it's just a little bit more realism. It's a little bit more convincing. And then if I just pop this on here up against this goes back to what I was saying before. You can see this looks all a little bit new. So I'm just going to pop it back in the airbrush area and just lightly dust it with some black, or probably some dark grey, just to take it down a little bit. So I've just dulled that down a little bit. You can still see all the pattern, but you'll notice next to this it's a slightly lighter colour, because this is effectively the newer paving, as I've said many times. And so I think there's just enough of a colour difference there to get across what I'm trying to achieve. So I think we're now at a point where we can probably stick this piece down and move on to dealing with some of the bollards around here. So what I'm going to do first is I'll stick this down and I'll show you a video of how I came up with a way of making pedestrian footpath bollards. Here's a quick video on making bollards to go around pedestrian pavement areas. Now you may remember from when I did the crash barrier video, I shall put a link to that, I had these little threaded tube connectors which I got off eBay, and some Allen headed countersunk bolts to go in them. And when I did the higher catch fence with the threaded bar in the top, I got these little silicon caps to go on top of the threaded bar. Again, just off eBay. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to paint these, so I need to scratch them up a little bit first with some Scotch-Brite, just so there's a bit of a key to that. I'm going to paint it up. I'm going to get this cap. I'm going to cut about that much off. And the same again. And now I'm going to put this cap, this little piece that's left. That's tricky, but it will go on. Over the end of there. and then I'll slide that piece on about halfway up, that piece on the bottom. And then that sprayed black is a pedestrian bollard. So I'm going to do that, do all of these, then I'll paint them all black. I might put a bit of etch primer paint on first just to get the black to stick better, and then paint them black. And then decide where they're going in the scenery board, drill a hole, countersink it, screw them up through the bottom so they're straight. So that's that. So that's the end of this little bit of video. Back to the other bit of video where I'll now be putting these on the board. Well, I hope you enjoyed that little interlude. Here I am back with some of these finished bollards. I've screwed them through a piece of card because then when you're spraying them you can flex the card about and get the paint all over all of it. So now I need to put these into here. I've marked off with some dots where I want each of these bollards, and I need to drill a hole through that way, countersink it the other way, and then screw these in. But there's one more thing I need to do as well while I'm here. So I'll do one to show you, and then I'll do the rest, and then we'll come back and we'll finish off this wall. So I'll put this on here. I'll do this one just because it'll be easiest. No, actually I'll do this one because it'll be easiest to show you. So I'm going to drill a hole through here. Don't press too hard because you're going to drill through some cardboard here, and if you press too hard it will ruck up and fluff, and that will cause you other problems. So you need to do this really quite slowly from the start. Just let the drill cut gently through the card rather than pushing it through. And then once you start to see the sawdust you can push a little bit harder. Now that will have rocked up a little bit under there, but not very much. So there's the hole, but as you can see it's got a little bit of a white mark around it. Now this doesn't matter because when you see bollards on the side of roads like this, people don't walk very close to the bollard, and people who clean streets don't clean very close to the bollard. So there's always a slightly darker patch around here. So I'm going to add a little bit of dirt before I put the bollard in. And I have a way of doing this as well. Here's just a plastic top and some black airbrush paint. Doesn't matter what it is really. Put a little dot on there. Don't use a good brush for this, use a terrible brush. Grab a little bit and then dry brush it right out. And then swirl it there and then rub it with your finger. Swirl it, rub it with your finger. And then get most of it off and just spread it out a little bit. And obviously that's covered up the white, but you've also got just a little bit of a dark patch. Around that hole. So when we come now just countersink the other side. That'll do. Now, the other thing here is, don't worry if you don't drill a hole through straight. People drive terribly. These things never stay perfectly upright for very long. Somebody's bound to knock into one and knock it over slightly. So, I think this one is pretty straight though, actually. But if they're not, it just adds character. So there we are. I don't know if you can see that. There's a bollard, just a little bit of dirty surface around it. So I'm going to do the rest of these. I'm also going to distress along the join between this wall and the slabs, because again, it's somewhere where dirt will collect. I want a little bit to go up the wall as well, because when it rains and the rains hit the dirt, it splashes against the wall. So you don't need to be super neat, just a big load of dirt all along the back there. And where this goes down to a fairly narrow point and people likely don't walk, again, and around all the rest of these bollards. And I shall go up the edge of here as well, because that's where the edge of the hut sits and people would not be walking right close to the edge of the hut. So a little bit more dirt applied here, and I shall apply some around the hut on the other piece and everything else. And then we'll come back and we'll finish off this wall. And now all of the bollards are in, and there's just a kind of little dirty mark around the bottom of each of them. And I don't know if you can see, but there is applied grime along the wall and just down the edge there. So the last thing to do to finish this wall off is put some coping stones on the top. And as we've done this once already, cut to the other little bit of video where I make some coping stones. In order to make some coping stones for the top of the wall, hopefully there'll be a nice bit of inset video here where I show you how I got to this point. I got some spare bits of MDF from Magnetic Racing Kits, and I chopped them up into lengths and I stuck them along the edges of masking tape, and then I've subsequently sprayed them black and chopped them up a bit so they're easier to handle here. Now the reason I've stuck them along the edge of the masking tape is because then I know they're straight, which will be important later on. But for now, they're all just painted with a primer grey, a very dark grey. You could use black paint if you wanted. And the object now is to create an effect on them that makes them look a bit like concrete coping stones. So I put them down there. I'm going to airbrush it. I'm going to start by using some light grey just to get a good cover over here. Not even, but a cover, so some of the primer still shows through. And then I'm going to use a bit of grey blue, because the concrete for coping stones is usually a harder concrete, so it's usually a bit bluer than, say, paving slabs or other such things. So I'll put a little dust of grey blue over. And I've got some gunship grey towards the end. If at any point I feel like it's all gone a bit too blue, I've got a little bit of emergency light brown that I can put over the top just to lift it back up again. And I'm also just going to have a bit of airbrush thinner here, because sometimes a real watery coat on this will give you the right effect. I don't know, I'm playing it by ear. Just keep doing it until it looks right. There's no real skill in this beyond vaguely picking the right colours. So I'll do a load of spraying, and then I'll come back and talk to you. So having sprayed these various bits of grey and given it a bit of a mottled effect, we come to why I stuck this down the edges in straight lines. Well, it's coping stones for the top of a wall, and they're usually got a slight crown on the top of them. So what I'm going to do, I'll show you on one. Because they're all in a straight line, it should be pretty easy to get this and stick it roughly down the middle. So the plan then will be mask them all up the same, and then the half that's still showing, just spray it ever so slightly lighter than the other half, just with a little bit more light grey over the top, and then that should give a bit of a beveled edge, and it will look like a coping stone sitting on top of the wall without having to shape every single one of these. That's the plan. We'll see how it works out. And so now we'll take these off here and see if it worked. So there we are. I think that's quite successful. I shall try these on the top of the wall now, see how it works out. And here are the coping stones. So I just need to stick these on the top of the wall, really. Making sure that I've got the light side and the dark side the same way around on all of them. There we are. Finished wall with just what looks like a slight bevel on the top of those, but isn't. Quite effective. Right, I'll go and put that back on the layout. So put that in there. I have also, as you can see, put the bollards around here and further around here as well. And I have done a little bit of dirting. I said I'd do dirt round where the coffee hut would go, so that's there as well. I shall put the benches back here for a minute, just so we can get an idea of what's going on. I need some better seating than this, but this will do for now. Oh yes, the litter bin. Well, I shall fill it up with some litter, and then I'll put that on here somewhere, probably about here. And again, needs a bit of dark paint, dry brushing round there, because again, that's something that wouldn't get cleaned by the street cleaner, if indeed you have a street cleaner these days. A few more bits and pieces I need to do. Just a little sign here, maybe, certainly one there, maybe a street sign down here. I don't know, I'll do a few bits and pieces, and I do still need to do the garage floor. So I might do that next, and then we'll do a few more little signs and things. All I'm going to do here is route out some slots for the guides for these things to sit in. And then, as I did with my car park, you can look at the car park video, I'll probably put a link to it somewhere. Just some little flat pieces of 2mm MDF, more sprue offcuts on the back here, just to rest the belly of the car on, so that it looks like it's sitting on the ground, but the wheels are in fact very slightly off the ground, so the tyres don't flat spot. So that's all of that plan. We'll try and get on with some of that, I think. So after a bit of fiddling about, we've reached this point. I've routed the slots into the board here so that the cars can sit and appear to be more on the road than up in the air. And with these little slabs in the back here, which when I did the car park, because they were kind of clear and visible, I smoothed off the edges to try and hide them slightly, but these are in the back of a garage, so it's not going to matter too much. There was a little bit of brass cutting and some soldering and so on, and I've made myself some road signs. I decided that things like this, if they're going to stick up, they probably need to be made out of something decent. If I'd just made them out of like toothpicks or something, I'd snap them when I was reaching for cars. So I've made some dead end road signs, one to go there, and I'll probably just drill into the board and super glue these in so they're set in a little way. And another one to go this side, because we like a lot of road signs here. We have the double yellow lines. Now I need to put some little stripes on the curbs for the no loading at any time sign. So that will then probably go, I think, on the corner of the building here, about like this. That's the sort of place they'd usually put these. I've got the bin, which I'm going to fill up with rubbish using an actual piece of black bin liner, which I'll stuff up there, and then I've got some bits of masking tape and some paint and things, and I'll paint some colours on it so it looks like there's rubbish in the bin. And then I can put some weathering round here and stick that down here somewhere, I think. And the last thing I made was a street sign. 2 pieces and a piece of flat, just soldered together. Bob Dylan fans will appreciate that, I'm sure. So that will go down here. And the last thing I've got to work out really in terms of the baseboard stuff is the garage floor texture. Now, I've been talking with Mrs. Slottar about this, and we think it's kind of got to be polished concrete floor because it's a garage workshop and the easiest thing to do. if you've taken over a previously derelict building and started using it again, is get a concrete polisher and polish the floor. So it needs to be a concrete texture, that sort of colour, but quite a consistent and slightly shiny. So I think whatever I do here, I'm going to put some paint on, and then I might try and spray it with a bit of clear lacquer just to see if I can get a shine onto it. We'll see how that goes. Now this video is getting on a bit now in terms of time, so I think what I'm going to do is do those things, finish it off and put it all back together, and we'll have a wrap up and we'll talk about what we're going to do in the next part. And so there we are. The board, the ground if you like, is finished. I'm quite pleased with the way this polished concrete effect came out. As you probably saw in the video, trying to paint an area this big with an airbrush is like trying to mow a lawn with a pair of scissors, and you're never going to get it even. But that was kind of the point. Concrete isn't even. It's a slightly patchy thing. So I went with white, dark grey, light grey, and then a little bit of olivey green over the top, and then a little bit more light grey over that, and then a couple of coats of clear lacquer, and it's grey and slightly mottled, and in the correct light there is a slight polish to it, which is what you would get from a polished concrete garage floor. Got my little parking spaces with me uprights in there, so the cars can fit on here and appear to be on the ground in the garage. Well, I should probably put the garage back now. Goes just against that street sign there, which is great. Weathered square, put the coffee shop on there. And there we are. That's not far off. I think I might still put that up there, and we might as well just finish the whole thing off so you get a good look at exactly where we've got to. There's a couple of benches to go back on there. And now, I know I said at the end of the last video it'll be a couple of weeks before the next one, and it wasn't, because I just kept fiddling with this and we've ended up with another video a week later. But the final part of this, where I do the interior here, and where I'll probably make a sign or get a sign to put on the front of here to give this bar a name, that'll all happen in the next episode. And I'll just give you one final pan all the way around here, like this. And as you'll see, got my disclaimer on the wall, so anybody get hit sitting in front of here on these benches, it's their own fault. And because, as Bob Ross says, this is your world, you can do anything you like. In my world, Motorhead and the Cramps and the Ramones are still playing gigs. These are the posters from 3 gigs I went to. So, as it's my world, all 3 of probably some of the best gigs I've ever been to in my life are still advertised as upcoming, and I'm going to go to them. As always, thanks for watching one of my videos. If you liked it, you will find a button specifically for that. Please subscribe to the channel, it really does help, and it's free. And if you press the bell, you will get a notification the next time I post a video. And as always, check out this slot car channel.